Last sort of notes about chapter 10. Fallacies and pitfalls. Most of our chapters end with a reminder about the pitfalls of how you could sort of interpret the chapter, dividing the work based on software stack rather than features. This is a really common practice. And in fact, as you specialize in your career, you may find that you end up doing this at some level. But when you're on a small team in particular, and when you're getting started, it is really helpful to understand the whole stack and to work on both front end and back end. If you start dividing work that way, you start to introduce things like coordination. So yes, you could have a branch that just touches JavaScript, and yes, you could have a branch that just touches the Rails code. But now those two things have to be coordinated. It's usually much easier to work on a full stack approach, build smaller features at once. The agile approach, especially if you can work on small teams, right? The two pizza approach is that every team member gets to work on all parts of the same story. The only person then that you have to coordinate is with yourself or your pair programmer. And when you do things like write test cases, you have the full context of what to write, where you might need to break apart a test case. And reducing that coordination is super helpful. Other pitfalls. This one is easy, right? Accidentally stomping on changes after merging or switching branches. This is where setting up your environments and tools to give you the feedback about what kinds of things you're working on is super helpful. Most of the time, if you're working on one story at a time, you reduce the likelihood that this is happening. But the good thing about Git is that while it can be a beast to deal with, is that if you're using Git, there's almost no change that you can't recover from. And so if accidents happen, you can sort of level up your Git foo, go look at how to revert a commit, undo something, and then get back to a good state. Before you pull code in, before you merge any additional changes, commit whatever you're working on such that your repo is sort of in a clean state. Before you begin a new feature, you should pull from the most recent version. And after you pull or merge, make sure that the content that you're looking at is the current version. Most editors today are good about refreshing files on you, once they change on your file system. But you do want to make sure that the thing that you're looking at is always the right version, or that corollary of this is that when you commit, make sure that all the files in your editor are saved. VS Code, right, puts a little dot in the tab next to each file name. Many people don't realize this. It's there, but it's sort of, invisible. If this is a today I learned moment, that's fine. I think it did take me a year of using VS Code to just realize that that's exactly what that dot meant. This thing is unsaved, because you just sometimes don't pay attention to these things. But building the habits helps with that. This is always too easy to do, but don't let your repo copy get stale. If you're working on a project frequently, make sure that you are constantly syncing with the origin repository, whether that's your team's copy or if it's a forked version, the upstream remote. It's really easy to forget to do this, and doing so just leads to more merge conflicts in the future. Really, the way that you think about this is as you're working, right before you start a feature, always git pull to get the latest version. If you have a long-lived branch or something's been around for a while, you can use git rebase to sync any changes, to clean up the merge history, and so on. Two other fallacies that we should sort of think about and be aware of. We've gone through this before, but fallacy is that it's fine to make changes in the main branch. Really, it's so easy to do this by accident. I have done it and regretted it. You will do it and will regret it at some point. You will also probably do it and get away with it once or twice, but you should break that habit as much as possible, because the times where you do it and regret it are really particularly painful. So always create a feature branch when you start doing work. Create branches even if you're just exploring code. Create branches if you just need to test something out. Branches are cheap and easy. You can have hundreds of them in a repo. Git really doesn't care. It's not going to judge you. It's not going to slow down just because you have a lot of branches. Reminders about chapter 10, some sort of concluding ideas. 2 pizza teams. Keep your development team small, a coherent working group, 4 to 9 people, sort of what we say. This helps reduce the management problem, but it's also important to remember that there is no sort of reduction of management on a team. Someone needs to be there to help people prioritize stories. Someone needs to be there to help resolve conflicts, break ties. And in Scrum, we have roles like the Scrum Master and Product Owner. You should be using story points. You should be tracking things like velocity and logging stories, but your goal should not be to use them as a metric on their own of success or failure. You should be using them to give yourself a better sense of what is a stable working environment, to be better at predicting the amount of work that you can do. Predicting the time that it takes to build a feature is one of the hardest things in software. No one is good at it, or I should say no one is great at it, but you do get better over time by making a prediction, seeing what happens, thinking critically about those results, and then revising your prediction on the next step. The plan and document approach, right? It suggests that you have more plans up front, more reviews that you lean on, and you can have a successful approach in this way. But our goal is really to help you reduce that time of iteration. Importantly, when a project is done, or when a feature is done, when a new version is out, whatever it might be, take the time to assess what went well, what didn't go well, what you would do differently for next time. Make the time for those reviews, document what might need to change, or take the time to update any things like readmes, internal notes, such that next time you start something similar, you're in a better spot. Armando and Dave Patterson, well, Dave Patterson always likes the sort of 10 ways to do the wrong thing approach. You have to be careful with that because sometimes some of them are a little sarcastic that you might not realize, right? But just be wary. I think the first one is really easy to sort of fall into the cases. Try very hard not to feel like you have a test case where you say, I understand why that thing fails and it doesn't matter. Over time, you will definitely work on a test suite where things fail, but the app still works fine. If you run into that case, delete the test case. If it's failing and it's not being helpful in the app, you still trust that it works, delete the test case or mark it as pending in RSpec and it will skip over that. But really do try and hold to a consistent, nice, everything on GitHub is green. Those green check marks, they're like an odd set of like dopamine hits when you see a pull request come in and there's like, a dozen different checks that passed, all of them are successful. That's a good feeling. You want to give yourself that good feeling. Other simple guidelines, these are not going to be sort of hard and fast rules, but some teams work with this. So we'll talk about code metrics a little bit more in Module 9. But you can pick metrics, right? So if flog is a tool that gives you a measure of complexity, if its score is too high, you could say you need to refactor the method, split up into multiple functions. Some people take the hard and fast rule that if a branch lives longer than 3 days, you make a new branch, you extract some commits, you clean up the feature again, and then you try and get it merged. Whether or not that makes sense for your team is based on your team. Any branch that breaks the build system gets nuked. This is a pretty important one. You really don't ever want to merge in a branch. That will then cause all other branches to start failing. And you could also say, right, branches that reduce code coverage get rejected. The right metric there depends on your team. But also, this is just kind of funny. When I die, I would like the people I did group projects with to lure me into my grave so they can let me down one last time. I would say that when you're working in a team, remember that you are working with other people. Communicate if something goes wrong. Communicate if you need help. Don't let your teammates down by just sort of disappearing. And also, hopefully you have a better relationship than that.